Start the meeting. Firstly, could I just mention that this will be phone live. I just had it taken, didn't see the camera then, but it will be phone live. And if anybody doesn't wish to be on the recording or filming, if they could notify the clerk, please, on my left. Thank you. And then if we can move on to the items on the agenda. And apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Gloucester, Surjan and Islam. Councillor Williamson is substituting for Councillor Gloucester.
Yeah, and I've got apologies from Councillor Cosgrove as well. Is there any further apologies? No. Okay, thank you. Urgent business. I've not been notified of any urgent business at the meeting.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Thank you. No declarations of interest. Public questions.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting that have been circulated. Are we happy that's a correct record? Yes, thank you. Right, if we could go on to the first application of the evening, which is Springhead Quarry, Cooper Street, Springhead. And if I could ask Stephen Gill to present it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, good evening, members. First of all, I'd just like to draw your attention to the late list, which provides some additional information which was received since the publication of the committee report. So, just make sure you take the time to have a quick look at that before you come to any decision tonight. So, the scheme is an outline planning application. It's all matters reserved except for access, layout and landscaping. So only access, layout and landscaping are being considered as part of this planning application. For residential developments of up to 158 units on a site that falls within open, protected other land, OPAL 13 designation. The site is located on the eastern edge of Springhead and is enclosed by existing residential development to the northwest, southeast and west. So, sorry, this is technology for you. So that's the eastern boundary of the site, which is residential development proposed on that boundary. The western boundary's got sort of landscaping buffer, and then you got the access point from Delahide Close, and then the access point from Cooper Lane as well. Okay. So Springhead Cricket Club is also situated to the north, and Stonebreaks Road is situated to the east. Stonebreaks Conservation Area is also situated directly to the north and east of the site. So Stonebreaks Conservation Area is at this section of the site over here. Just so members can get a feel for the layout of the site. So within the site there are many different characteristics, which include the former Springhead Quarry, which lies southwest of the site. So that's down in this area of the site is the old quarry area. There's also a small quarry to the north end of the site which has been filled in as well. So, public rights of way 203 runs through the site from north to south, and public rights of way 192 also runs through from the eastern boundary through to the north. The remainder of the site is a mixture of grassland, scrub, woodland and heath habitats. A green corridor is also situated around the boundary of the site to the south, east and west. So this slide shows the extent of the OPAL designation on the site, which is hashed in black. So as you can see, this area here is where the OPAL designation is. The black outline is the site outline for the plan application, and this area here was where the old quarry sits, and that is actually outside the OPAL designation and is considered to be previously developed land. So in terms of the general layout, the applicant has submitted a typology plan which gives us an understanding of the proposed tenure type for the development, which includes a mix of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bed properties, and no objections have been raised to the tenure split proposed by the applicant. So amenity is a key consideration for these types of developments, and separation distances are crucial when assessing amenity. The development demonstrates adequate separation distances between the proposed properties and those that exist around the site. That's on the east and west boundary. Adequate separation is also demonstrated between the proposed properties within the site at the south end. This is not only because of the distances, but also the level differences between the land within the old quarry and the land that surrounds it. So just to give you a feel for sort of the level differences in the site and around the site, this section shows the relationship between the properties proposed within the site and those that exist on the eastern boundary. You can see the level differences and also around a 40-metre gap between the existing and proposed. And that sort of, there's where the proposed development is, and sort of on the eastern boundary, and that relationship to those properties on the eastern boundary, and that shows you where the section's been taken from. So this section shows the relationship of the development to Stonebreak's conservation area, which is acceptable in terms of distance. So you can see, oh, that's a different one, sorry, I've gone too far ahead there. So this section shows the relationship between the development and the conservation area. There's around a 95-metre distance between those properties, and you can see where that section's been taken there. So there's no issues in that regard and no objections from conservation. So this particular section is taken from the quarry, and it shows you sort of the proposed units down in the quarry area and proposed units at the top here. So it kind of gives you a feel for the sort of level differences within the site and surrounding the site. It's a very tricky site in terms of levels due to the previous use of the site being in a quarry at the south end. So moving on to landscape and ecology, the applicant has submitted a substantial amount of information in relation to landscaping and ecology. In terms of landscaping proposals, in summary, a woodland themed open space is proposed to the northeast of the site, so that's here. A small scale play zone is proposed within some woodland planting at the northern tip, which is here. Within some woodlands, and a landscape buffer is also proposed on the western boundary, obviously it's down here. There is also a proposal to retain and enhance the existing woodland and introduce some native trees and shrubs to the south end of the site. As part of landscaping, the applicants are proposing to retain a substantial amount of dry heath and acid grassland through the centre of the site. So that's all this around here, around the quarry area and through the site to the north. And mostly in the area of the former quarry, and there's a large areas of retained semi-improved grassland, mostly concentrated on the eastern and western boundaries. So Greater Manchester Ecology Unit have reviewed the information submitted and do not support the application. GMEU conclude that efforts have been made by the applicant to retain the most important habitat areas. GMEU also acknowledge that the proposed landscaping. However, the losses of semi-natural habitats are substantial, and it is considered that the habitats that would be retained as part of development will be fragmented, isolated, and subject to high levels of public disturbance. GMEU conclude that the biodiversity net losses would still result in on-site losses of 25 units, even with the mitigation, which is significant. Overall, GMEU are of the view that the development would erode the OPAL designation to an unacceptable level. Even with the landscape and overall mitigation proposed, the development would still result in significant habitat losses and habitat fragmentation. This does not weigh in favour of the development. So, in relation to highways, as set out in the committee report, the highways engineer has raised concerns, most specifically in relation to development's impact on Cooper Street. Cooper Street, which runs at the south and west of the site, does not have footways or standard widths either side of the carriageway, which allows for 2 running lanes, and as a result, pedestrian access is considered poor. The highway engineer has serious concerns that the poor geometry of Cooper Street, in conjunction with additional traffic generation from the development, has the potential to cause unacceptable highway safety implications for vulnerable users such as pedestrians and cyclists. To consider this, the applicant did submit some potential improvement schemes on Cooper Street, which included the following: an uncontrolled pedestrian drop crossing with tactile paving to the north of the proposed access. So that's improvement works here, that's the site access on Cooper Street. So the second option that they proposed was an uncontrolled pedestrian drop crossing with tactile paving to the north of the proposed site access with a raised table to calm traffic or speeds. That's that particular scheme here. So you can see the raised table, crossing here, site access, same again. And finally, they also proposed, as an alternative to that, an uncontrolled pedestrian drop crossing with tactile paving to the north of the site access with a curb build out to widen the footway locally. So the same crossing proposed here with a curb build out around here to try and improve pedestrian connectivity to and from the site. Following a review of the improvement works, the highways engineer concluded that none of the above improvement proposals would alleviate their concerns, and this is because even with the improvements in place, visibility for pedestrian and road users would still be poor. Therefore, it was concluded that the development would result in unacceptable adverse impacts to highway safety, which does not weigh in favour of the development. Okay. So, notwithstanding what you've heard so far, there are some benefits to the scheme that should be noted by members, which include the following. 1, a strong contribution to housing provision towards the borough's housing land supply position, which is clearly a benefit. 2, the development will deliver 20% affordable housing on site, which would be divided up into 25% first homes, 25% other intermediate tenure, and 50% social and affordable rent, in accordance with the Affordable Housing Interim Position Paper. So that is clearly a benefit. 3, the development proposes the introduction of 8.5 acres, not hectares, acres of on-site open space provision. This includes landscaped green corridor through the site. Provision for children and young people would be created in the form of a play area, amenity green space, and natural and semi-natural open space. This is considered to be beneficial as the typologies proposed would help address some of the open space typology shortfalls in the borough and in that particular area. So that's the affordable housing plan that the applicant has submitted, which is considered to be acceptable and a benefit of the scheme, mostly concentrated in the sort of south end of the site. And this is the open space proposals we talked about, which the applicant has undertaken quite a lot of work to come up with these proposals, and this is actually supported by spatial planning. So finally, there are several material planning considerations for and against the application which should be weighed up when making a decision on the application. The matters in favour of the application are a strong contribution to housing provision, as we've just discussed, the provision for 20% affordable housing, and the typologies of open space we've just discussed as described. Overall, these benefits, in our view, have been given moderate weight in favour of the application for the reasons set out in the committee report. The matters not in favour of the application, in our view, is the development would erode 40% of Opal 13 and will result in the comprehensive redevelopment in an Opal designation. 2, the layout proposed will cause substantial habitat and biodiversity net gain losses that cannot be mitigated appropriately through on-site mitigation. And 3, the development in some parts will cause moderate to major adverse visual effects. And 4, the development will adversely impact the green corridor as set out by GMEU. 5, the highways engineer concludes that Cooper Street has the potential to be utilised by traffic a lot more frequently because of the development. The increase in traffic in conjunction with the geometry and the poor pedestrian access at Cooper Street means the development will result in unacceptable highway implications. Overall, when taking all those matters into consideration, these have been given substantial weight in the planning balance for the reasons given in the committee report. Therefore, it is considered that the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and it is on that basis that it is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of the officer's report? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Have you got a photo of where it's going to be? I can't see any of these maps and stuff. They're too far away. Oh gosh, blimey.
I haven't got any photos as part of the presentation, to be honest with you.
Right. Do you mind if I go off of this? I'm just trying to... So Cooper Street runs... Does it run past... So it's Springhead, is it?
Yeah.
Right. So it runs down to Springhead Infant and Nursery? Is that near it?
Yes.
Near this... Right. So I'm just trying to get the location. Oh, so it's down that way. Right, okay. Right. So then there's Knowsley Junior School, right? Is it round that area you're talking about? Because yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And oh, I see it now. So is the brown build bit, is that like a donut or something like that? Somebody described
this
it
here.
as.
This.
Right. Oh, I see. Right.
That's the previous quarry.
So that's
area.
a brownfield site.
Yeah, that section of the site is PDL, previously developed land, yes.
And then the rest of it is
is part of an Opal designation. The whole of the Opal designation is not being developed, it's just part of it. I'll show you.
Yeah, that was my other question. What is the part of Opal that is...
So the bit that's hashed here
Yeah.
is the Opal designation.
Right,
So, and this bit here is the site outline.
right,
So this section here, which is considered the quarry area, sits outside the Opal designation in its previously developed land. There was a planning application on that site in 2011 that accepted the principle of residential development on that section of the land. This section here is part of the Opal designation, and this falls outside of the site boundary as well. So you can see that it's not the whole of Opal 13 that's being redeveloped, but a substantial amount of it.
right. So their houses there already ready from a previous planning
No. That plan application was never delivered.
All right, okay.
So it was never brought forward.
Okay.
So it's just essentially this section of the site is part of what we consider to be previously developed land. That's actually in the Brownfield Register, but it sits outside the Opal designation.
And then one last thing, you said something about disturbance. Somebody was a bit perturbed about the disturbance.
Ecology.
Yeah.
So basically, obviously the site now, according to GMEU, has high ecological value,
Right.
and if it was redeveloped for residential development, even though the applicant has made a lot of effort to try and retain some of that ecological merit of the site, what the GMEU's view is that it will become fragmented and subject to public disturbance as a result of the development.
Right, that's fine. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Have we got any more questions of the officer? Yes, Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask, please, why there's no Saddleworth Parish Council recommendation contained in the report? Thank you.
I don't think I received a response.
I don't know if they've had chance yet to consider it, but I do feel very strongly that for applications that fall within the civil parish, particularly ones of this nature, the committee at Saddleworth Parish Council should get the opportunity to provide a recommendation to this committee beforehand.
Right, I'm not entirely sure whether you've been consulted. I'd have to have a look at that and come back to you separately if that's okay. Noted, thank you.
Councillor Alandani.
Just to provide information on that, because this came forward, I think, quite a long time ago. I think it went to Saddleworth Parish Council similarly a long time ago, and then it's just come forward to Council now. So I think it may be an issue over the length of time from when the Parish Council was originally consulted to when it's come forward to now as to why that might have got lost.
That very well may be the case, and what I'll do is I'll come back to you on that, and I'll let you know if we've been notified. It's all noted.
Have we got any more questions of the officer before we go to the speakers? If not, if we move to the speakers, we've got one on behalf of the objector, which is Kevin Lawton. Mr. Lawton, like other speakers, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Just before the time's up, you'll be given notice that your time's coming to an end. So if you go ahead in your own time, if you use the microphone in front of you.
Loved it. Good evening. I have agreed to represent the many objectors to this application. I live in Delhyde Close, one of the proposed access routes, and would be dramatically affected by the proposals. So I'm delighted with the officer's recommendation to reject it. The officers have picked out 3 key issues, the most important one for me being the Opal conclusion, and given that about 3/4 of the site is Opal, there is no way that building over 100 houses on it is appropriate, small scale or ancillary. The other issues of overdevelopment, habitat and biodiversity loss and traffic safety issues on Cooper Street echo and recognise the main concerns raised by local residents. We are delighted to see the conclusion that there is no tilted balance in favour of development and trust that the committee will tonight formally reject this application. There are other issues that I wish to draw members' attention to. Following approval of 234 houses on Knowles Lane development, which is in the same ward, this site is definitely not sustainable in relation to travel, environment and local facilities such as doctors, dentists and schools. There are no significant local employment opportunities, so it will be a commuter estate. The sustainable travel appraisal completely understates the distances and topography to access public transport and shops. The loss of trees in the grounds of Grade 2 listed Highfield House is referred to, but not the fact that in excess of 20 of them are subject to tree preservation order, and the Council's arboriculturist has expressed concern at this loss. The National Planning Policy Framework also allows rejection of this application due to increased pollution from light, noise and vehicle emissions. I dispute the conclusion that extra traffic from this proposal and from Knowles Lane site, a total of 392 houses, will not add to existing congestion on Oldham Road, both locally and nearer to the town centre. We already have difficulty joining the traffic on Oldham Road, and Huddersfield Road has not been assessed at all. The two main access points are variously substandard in terms of gradients, radii and sightlines, and I disagree with the conclusion that they are acceptable. The entrance via Delhide Close, built 30 years ago, does not comply with current disability or highway standards. The creation of two excessively long cul-de-sacs would result in an emergency access risk. 13 existing properties on Delhide Close will be faced with a 5-fold increase in traffic from the 61 extra houses proposed, and as it would still be a cul-de-sac, the associated in and out movements of vehicles would cause increased risk, disruption and emissions. There are just 2 public comments supporting this application, wanting houses for family members. The nearby Knowles Lane site will provide this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lawson. Has anybody got any questions of Mr Lawson? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr Lawson. Is it Lawson or Lawton? Sorry. Lawton. Sorry, I do apologise. Just interesting to hear what you were saying about the magic opal. You know, it's saved this site, I believe, and I'm really pleased for you. And some of your comments that you've made about highways, quite interested in, because you say that Huddersfield Road hasn't been looked at, and I'd like to know what you think that would add to, if this wasn't being refused, what would Huddersfield Road add to it? I know Huddersfield. Now these guys over here have told me where it is. I know exactly where it is because I've been there myself. So there you go. So yeah, I would be interested to know.
I was just making the point, Chair, that Huddersfield Road, which is an alternative way into Oldham, you've got Lees Road or Huddersfield Road, has not been assessed at all for its impact from the extra traffic in this area, because Cooper Street could feed either way down to Oldham Road or Huddersfield Road.
Is there any further questions, Mr Lawton? No? If not, if we can move on to a speaker on behalf of the applicant, and that's Lizzie Schofield.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Stonebreaks Group, who are landowners, not a developer, and wish to achieve planning on their land to address a significant and undeniable shortfall of housing in Saddleworth West and Lees. We have issued our final statement, which we have hoped you've had the opportunity to read prior to tonight, which highlights the following benefits. A 366% increase in accessible open space, 8.5 acres of managed open space equating to 5 football pitches and 45% of the whole site. 12 acres of redesignated opal, including areas previously outside of the allocation, but assessed to be of greater quality. Development of a PDL brownfield site. 32 affordable homes equating to 20% of the site. 600,000 a year minimum in council tax. Our comments on the reasons for refusal are as follows. Opal. Oldham can only demonstrate a 4-year supply of housing measured against a national target of 5 years. The shortfall in housing means that Policy 22 is out of date and should be afforded limited weight in the determination of this application. Oldham are choosing to rely on places for everyone to satisfy the shortfall. The PFE plan is not adopted and should not be relied upon until the examination is concluded, as there is no guarantee it will deliver, as was evidenced by the outcome of GMSF. Ecology consultation responses were received on the 5th of October. Stephen Gill and myself have spent the past month asking for clarification on where GMEU would like to see a reduction in units, to which we received on the 1st of this month. Reduction in units within the quarry would directly contradict with the authority's preference of area for development. Nevertheless, should we have received these comments within the consultation period, we would have addressed what is now a reason for refusal and further reduced the scheme. The design team held 6 highways meetings with officers and understood to have successfully resolved all matters with no mention of this new reason for refusal. The proposed development provides a network of pathways incorporating desire lines into formal paths and diverts pedestrians away from Cooper Street, which will alleviate the existing issues, a benefit, not a reason for refusal. We fundamentally believe in the importance of providing quality over quantity when it comes to Opal and open space. We can't provide 32 affordable homes, acres of usable, accessible, managed open space, accessibility for all, pay millions of pounds in contributions to support local infrastructure, schools and ecology, generate hundreds of thousands in council tax without losing some lower quality Opal. We would ask the committee to review the standards to which these 2 late resolvable refusal reasons have been put on us. We request that the committee consider the application based solely on the balance of the loss of some low quality Opal against the significant benefits and improvements. And we would ask for questions to be directed to ourselves and the landowner and not to those who have been offered but refused input. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Williamson.
Can you just explain the extra space, green space you said? Was it 366% lot, and where would that be, firstly? And then secondly, so could the developer just build on the brownfield site and not anywhere else?
Thank you. So the 366% increase, so this is private land. Technically, access is limited to the pathways that run through the site. We're proposing to create accessible areas of space, not just pathways, significantly increase the pathways and their accessibility. At the moment, they're quite limited to who they can access because of the nature of the site and the topography. So we're proposing that access for the public is not limited to just those pathways. We want to open up 45% of the site to be accessed by everybody. On the PDL brownfield, the reason that the PDL site has not come forward is because of viability issues. So we need areas of land outside of the PDL to support that, to bring that development forward, which is why we have come to this conclusion. And what we've tried to do is balance a kind of, we need some areas elsewhere, however, we can't take those areas and give you back some areas of greater quality, which are found in like the quarry walls. So you'll see on one of the images that was on with the Opal before, the new green area of Opal that we're proposing is through our assessments of the site. So we have done, for example, the ecology is a kind of key thing there. Yeah. GMEU have said their preference of loss of units would be in the quarry. We can't do a loss of units in the quarry for an ecology basis, but not do, and it doesn't work. So yeah, that's a summary. No problems.
Has anybody else got any questions of the speaker? Councillor Aldani.
Thank you. You talked about the pathways diverting pedestrian traffic away from Cooper Street. But a lot of the pedestrian traffic, there's 2 schools sort of opposite. So my instinct, and that's instinct, it's not necessarily correct, would be that it would be dealing with the traffic from the site, but not necessarily diverting that pedestrian traffic. Could you explain how you thought that would work?
Yeah, so when we initially did consultations and tried to speak with people from the area, Knowlesley School at the top were very, very keen on making that main public right-of-way through the site really accessible and lit so that children could walk from the site, from the bottom of Cooper Street up to the top of Knowlesley, and alleviate the need for drop-offs and pick-ups down Cooper Street. So it's one of the things that we kind of thought, well, it makes sense. And the issue with Cooper Street, the existing issues are kind of further up the street. So the point at which we're saying this main public right of way goes through and we want to improve that and then produce connectivity from it is at the very bottom of the street. So you know where the old Quarry Road was that went in and the public right of way starts there. It's at the bottom and not actually where the access point is proposed at Highfield House. Does that make sense? Or?
Yes, it doesn't address, because there's two schools, that talks about, that's Knowsley. Springhead Infants is closer, from my understanding, to the area where that highway's concern is. And so I'm not sure how you're losing pedestrian footfall there, and that's where there's the concern.
Right, yes, sorry. So the infant school across the road from the development, is that the one you're discussing? Yeah, I mean, the whole point is that the kind of site kind of connects from bottom to top. So where it wraps round at the top, the idea is that people would use the pedestrian routes instead of coming directly through down Cooper Street to those schools. As a kind of, that's the thing that we discussed, and we previously did discuss with the infant school across the road providing a kind of car park to help, but we never furthered anything. But those are the kind of things that we have looked at as much as we could.
Thank you. There's no further question. Sorry, Councillor
Chair, hi, thanks for your speech. You mentioned something about the Opal space saying it's low quality. Can you elaborate on that for us, please?
Yes, so it's a very complex site, and a lot of the way that it's kind of developed and the areas that we've chosen to put housing, we've looked at the Opal designation. A lot of it relies on the kind of ecology, the history of the site, so stoneway markers that run through the public rights of way, the ecology, birds, stuff like that. So we've gone off a lot of ecology, so despite the fact that it's kind of contradicted now, we've picked areas that are kind of scrubby grassland bits that we could take from, whilst leaving in, say, the quarry walls and the history, the stoneway markers, which we think are of better quality than a piece of grassland, if that makes sense.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, can I ask Councillor Kenyon, who's a ward councillor, to address the meeting?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the people who live in Springhead, Groton and Lees. I'm very happy to be able to support Mr Gill's report to this committee. His recommendation that this application be refused is well researched and well reasoned. There have been several iterations of this application in 2012 and 2020 and this most recent one. Each time, huge numbers of residents have raised their voices to be heard in objection. Stone breaks, despite the applicant's opinion that it represents low-quality opal land, is actually an important protected green space that separates the villages of Groton and Springhead. And that separation is an important part of their identity. The green space is an important local amenity with many public footpaths that were especially valuable during lockdown. It's a place for families to walk and for kids to play. And this loss of opal was weighed carefully by the officer, and he has judged that the loss is not justified by the housing gain. Stonebreaks is also a haven for biodiversity, which the officer has noted would suffer markedly if the development were to go ahead. And the trees officer in the late list has also notes the huge tree loss if the development went ahead. The surrounding roads are chock full of existing traffic, and the dangers of adding to this I'm very happy to see the highways officer point out and recognise. For all these reasons, I would encourage you all to support the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kenyon. Has anybody got any questions of Councillor Kenyon? Councillor Williamson.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask you, there's a bit of a contradiction here with about the footpaths. You're saying there are many footpaths, and the lady was saying not many. So where do these footpaths go, and what? So if it was built on, what would the lack of those footpaths mean?
I suppose I was trying to give an idea of what this space is used for. So much of Greater Manchester is like a seamless conurbation. Stone Breaks is a green break between Groton and Spring Head, and people walk there with their dogs, with their families, and cross over it. They don't walk through a new housing estate. They walk through a green space, and from there you've got a great view of lots of different bits of Oldham and Saddleworth. And I guess that's what I was referring to.
Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Kenyon, you referred to earlier applications that have also received a high degree of public objection. Am I right to understand that the most recent one received more objections? So it's possible perhaps that in this consultation phase it's actually understated the degree of public opposition?
Yeah, so I think in the 2021, which the applicant withdrew, I think he got about 400 comments in sort of objection. This most recent one, I think it was probably, I can't quite recall, I think 160, something like that. And a lot of people felt that, you know, they'd already put their objection in, and yeah.
Okay, if there's no further questions of Councillor Kenyon, I'll open the application up for debate and decision. Has anybody got any observations or comments? Councillor Pythian.
I'd like to take on board the officer's recommendations and move for refusal, please.
Thank you. So Councillor Pythian has moved refusal. Councillor Williamson has seconded it. Has anybody got any comments or concerns about that? Councillor Alan Downey.
I would like to say, just to the developer, I do wish more developers would pay more, like the detail that you have put in to try and address things, it is very much appreciated. I think there are issues that haven't been addressed and so on, but I do wish more developers would take the attitude that you have. So I just, you know, it really does point out the difficulties in the planning system. But that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. If nobody else wants to contribute, it's been moved and seconded that we go with the officer's recommendation and the reasons why and refuse this application. Those in favour of refusal, please show. Those against? Abstaining? Okay. So I think it's unanimous because our two colleagues there missed the first few minutes and decided not to vote. Thank you very much indeed. So the application is refused. If we move on to the second application of the evening, which is a variation to an approved application in the Shaw Distribution Centre, and I think Mr. Dickman, who is rushing to his place, is going to speak on it.
Right, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I noted Steve had a little bit of problem with the technology, so obviously I apologise in advance if it all goes badly wrong on this occasion. Right, this application, obviously, so the members of the committee in March this year will have previously been aware of. It was an approval on an industrial site for residential development. That site operated at that point by two very large distribution type companies. Half of the site is now vacant, half of the site is still occupied, and this particular application is tied in with that particular fact. So as approved, various conditions were imposed, and all those conditions related to the overall scheme itself. what this application essentially seeks to do is to amend those conditions so that the scheme can come forward in a phased approach of 2 large distinct phases. So that's the site itself. As I say, just to the kind of north centre of Shore area, largely surrounded by residential properties, but there are still some other employment uses also in the vicinity of the site. This is the aerial view of the site. Access to the site, it works. Access to the site is the secondary section, which will be off Beale Lane, and then there are additional accesses off Linney Lane to the north. So this particular section that's due to come forward first is the northern section of the site. These are just giving some views of the original site as it stood. So there's a mix there of historic old mill buildings and more modern industrial premises. And one particular feature in the top left-hand side there is that the River Beale passes through the site, largely in culvert, but obviously with small areas of open water. Part of the scheme for environmental improvement is that that will be brought out into open water throughout the site with improved drainage facilities as well. These are to give you some views. This is, like I say, the northern end of the site, and as you can probably see, elements of the buildings there have now been removed. Now these are the proposed and existing master plans for the site. So what we're actually dealing with is this northern section of the site. So the proposed is on the left hand side, the approved scheme is on the right hand side. As you can see, essentially it's the same proposal. There are some changes though in the northwest corner of the site. So there was an area of open space provided at that point. Now that's intended to be a smaller area, other way around. There's an area of residential development which would add its own separate access point through to the site. That area will be retained as open space primarily as a drainage feature on the site. So obviously during periods of river fluvial flooding, that area would potentially be flooded, but during most of the time it will be available as additional open space. These are the existing access points onto Linney Lane. So this is the main access point. So the bulk of the development which will be served from the northern end of the site will be served by an improvement and a reconfiguration of this access. This is a secondary access to the site. Now this, as you can see, is used as an entrance to Linney Lane Motors, which is just off to the right of the picture at the moment. On the original scheme, this was also going to be an emergency access into the site. The revised scheme has been reconfigured so that this access will be improved to adoptable standard, appropriate width, visibility displays, footways to both sides, to serve a small element of the development. That could be around 10 dwellings, it could be 20 dwellings, but a small element of it. The highways engineer has looked at that element and is satisfied that the scheme would be acceptable. So again, left hand side, that's the access that serves the main bulk of the development and has previously been approved. And on the right hand side is a configuration that includes access to the residential development, but also an improved access into Linney Lane Motors itself. And obviously, given the scale of that proposal, you'll see from the report, the occupier of that company had some concerns about traffic, but given the configuration of the road and the small amount of traffic it's likely to generate, that's not considered to be a significant concern. This is just showing you Beale Lane, so it's the bottom end of the site, which will serve the later phase of the development, which is perhaps not likely to come for the current occupier, looking at some time scale within the next 5 years to vacate the site. So this could come forward at that time scale, could come forward before then. Again, this has previously been approved as the access point onto Beale Lane. So, as I say, this is application basically just for amendments to the conditions of the development, just so that they're phased, so that, for instance, land contamination issues, ecology issues, drainage issues can come forward on that phased basis. You'll see in the report there was a Section 106 agreement which was agreed with the previous application. With the applicant's further agreement, that will pull through. So all the requirements for any contributions on that will still apply to this particular development. So as I say, there's no significant changes in terms of off-site impacts. It's essentially the same in terms of where development is likely to take place in relation to neighbouring properties on the site and to the Metrolink line is unamended by this scheme. So subject to those amended conditions, it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr Dickman. Has anybody got any questions of the report? Councillor Alan Downey.
Thank you. The smaller access that was for reduced number of properties, just because I couldn't see, my assumption was that there was no through route. That was so it is just delineated. There's no way it could take any extra traffic.
That's correct. Yeah.
Councillor Williamson. Any further questions of the officer? Councillor Alan Downey.
Just to follow up with, you mentioned the Section 106, and I think this isn't a question that will have planning relevance, so maybe say that if that's part of the answer. We didn't agree, there was a Section 106 condition, but we didn't have the details of what would get pulled through yet, and I presume that's still not the case, and that will come later on.
Mr Dickman.
There is a signed legal agreement now on the site, yes. I'll just look at see whether that's actually a copy of that is on the website as well, I think.
I think there was...
Yeah, I think it's actually...
There was a very sizeable contribution, 106 contribution to education facilities, particularly, yeah. Is there any further questions of the officers?
Just coming back on your point, you said that there's a sizable amount going to education facilities.
There's a Section 106,
yeah.
Part of the Section 106. I'm going off memory, but I think it was quite a considerable sum.
And what was that for then?
To provide further places because of the number of properties that were being built.
But to provide further places in what? Where? Who?
I'm sorry, you know, this is a planning committee.
Yeah, I know, but you've just brought something up that I don't know anything about, and I'm asking a question.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't read the original application that got approved in February, but
I'm a sub. That's why.
Yes.
So they won't be flippant with me.
I'm not being.
You are being flippant. Can I have an answer to the question, please?
Chair, can I?
Yeah.
I can't remember the detail, but if there is an education contribution, it will be for the provision of school places in the vicinity of the development. So if this is in Shore, these school places will be for the children that may or may not live on the development. So it will be Shore schools.
So I'm thinking where it is, it'll probably be St George's, which has already had, I believe, some extension to the number of pupils. So yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
Thank you. Is there any further questions of the officers? We do have one speaker on this particular application, which is the applicant's representative, Mr Stinton.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just wanted to reaffirm to members the applicant's commitment to bringing forward new homes and the associated benefits they bring on this brownfield site. The original proposals were recommended for approval by this committee in July 2021, with planning permission formally granted earlier this year in March. Following more detailed technical work and commercial discussions, the purpose of this application is to expedite the delivery of the first phase of development to the north. This will be done by slightly amending condition wording relating to phasing and through minor updates to the illustrative master plan and the approved parameter plans. As mentioned, a key beneficial change to the originally approved scheme will be the creation of a permanent flood attenuation basin to the northeast of the site, which will enable the river bill to be deculverted in 2 separate development phases. This flood storage area will ensure the approved capacity, which was previously modelled and agreed with the Environment Agency, is still accommodated, and as is a permanent feature, once phase 2 of the site has been developed, it is anticipated that it will provide a betterment in flood terms over and above that of the original scheme. Given that it is anticipated the basin will remain dry in all but the most severe storm events, this approach also has the added benefit of increasing open space to the north of the site. The amendments proposed have been subject to additional technical assessments, which demonstrate that the updated scheme will not have any greater impacts on the original. The proposed development will continue to make a valuable contribution to the Council's housing land supply through the phased delivery of 400 new homes in a highly sustainable location within the centre of Shore. The proposed amendments to phasing do not affect the previous provisions agreed as part of the Section 106 agreement, and the added flexibility will greatly assist with the delivery of the overall scheme, especially as we move into more uncertain economic times. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Sinton. Has anybody got any questions at all? No? If not, could we open it up for discussion and resolution, please? Has anybody got any contributions? Councillor Williamson?
I understand that about health. We've got health because now we've got a health centre coming up, and some money is going to go towards that. Education as well, as like you've reminded me. Thank you. And but I'm just a bit concerned about the highways aspect of it. The entrance is going to be onto quite a busy road, and then you've got the traffic lights at the bottom, and it might not be as busy as Crompton Way or Shore Road or Oldham Road, but that bit can get really busy at times, and I suppose with the schooling aspect of it, with more children going, that will increase it. So I'm just a bit concerned about how pedestrians are going to be able to use that site, and also those pedestrians that are not living on that site but are using Linney Lane as a walk through to Shore Town Centre. Oh, sorry.
So, just to clarify, obviously the application before us tonight is a variation of the existing permission to amend the particular conditions that are referred to in the application. So we're not able to reopen any debate or decision around the key highways accesses. Obviously there was a small amendment in terms of the highways access for the smaller part of the development in the north east of the site. But yeah, so just to clarify from that point of view, so I appreciate your question from that, but in terms of the decision before us tonight, that's not something that we can reopen the highways access and the way that pedestrians move through the site. It's only the matters that are the subject of the conditions in the description.
But you've been mentioning highways and that site next to the Linney Lane Motors or whatever. So why can't you answer that on that aspect?
So in terms of that one small access, as has already been answered by my colleague, the impact of that very small access is minimal. So how many houses are coming off that access?
That would be subject to a subsequent reserved matters applications. Anticipated that it could be anything between 10, 20, but no more than that, given the area of site. Because of the River Beal and where it cuts through the site, that area of land is limited. It's physically limited in itself, so it can't serve any more than that. And I think, as Wendy will probably be able to confirm, the design of that access point is sufficient and adequate to serve a development of that scale, and of course the continued operation of that access by Linney Lane Motors themselves. But as Peter has implied, the rest of the scheme, the principle of the rest of the scheme, is not open for further consideration. That's already been subject to approval. It's just the case of now they're going to come forward effectively in two distinct phases rather than as previously approved. It was kind of implied that would be one phase. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any further comments or contributions anybody would make? It's recommended for approval, so could I move we approve the application? Councillor Hussain seconded it. If I take a vote, all those in favour of approval, please, show. Were there any abstentions? No? Yeah. Thank you. If we move on to the next application, then, which is land at Westway Shaw, which is the application is for a 3-storey health centre. Mr. Dickman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For members of a planning committee who were around in 2012, this would be like a return to history. So obviously this is a proposal for a new medical centre in the centre of Shaw to replace 2 existing medical facilities which share a building just to the south of the site. So it's now looking to come forward to fruition with that scheme. So this is the site itself. It was the former baths building, which is the way you can see at the northern end of the site, more kind of grassed over area, which is on this aerial photograph. It's not entirely the same on there now. It was where the building originally stood on the site. So it extends down across this kind of area of the site. Now this is just immediately to the south, so it's just actually off this photograph, just in this corner. So that's where the facility is, which when we move to the site, and as you can see, it's a fairly limited single-storey building on there, probably past its best. This is the proposal for the development. So the main building itself is an L-shaped structure which will be located at the northern end of the site. Just to the east of the site, at the back of the retail premises that are on Market Street, and there's some residential accommodation above those. The Life Learning Centre is at the southern end of the site, and the remainder of the area will be intended for car parking facilities which will serve the proposed medical centre. But everybody who knows the centre of Shaw will know there is also quite a large number of other non-payment public parking facilities nearby as well, should there be any overflow. So this is, say, on the eastern side of the site. So these are the closest residential properties on the upper floors of these buildings. There is adequate separation distance between those, basically the equivalent of what you would expect on a residential development, between overlooking windows on there. But obviously for the medical centre in the evenings, it's unlikely that those rooms will be used in any case. So this is part of the site. Again, you see its existing condition. You can see some of the trees at the back of the site, so they will need to be removed. And members see from the report, the trees officer has looked at this. There is, as you can see, particularly what looks on the face of it, quite a fine tree. But other ash trees in the nearby memorial gardens have suffered from ash dieback. And although the tree seems healthy at the moment, it can't be guaranteed that that will be there in the longer term. But there are proposals for replacement tree planting, which, as members are aware, will have to comply with the council's 3-for-1 replacement policy. Again, just showing you the element of the site adjacent to Westway itself, and some existing car parking that's on the site. This is an older picture, and this is just again to give you an indication of what building was on the site previously. So this is, as you can see, a bit more ornate on the northern side, but more of kind of functional building originally as well. This is the proposal, so it's 3-storey, specifically designed to meet the health authority's current requirements, so it provides a range of facilities within there. It's got a flat roof structure, but so do the buildings on Market Street, which you saw previously. So that's pretty much in character with the neighbouring area. Again, the elevations looking across from the different elements of the site. Pretty difficult to see these, but these are just giving the details, obviously, within the building itself for the various floor levels. So, as I say, it's a site, it's in a highly sustainable location in the town centre. car parking provision being provided for the facility itself, but also, as I say, with other facilities nearby. It's been previously approved, albeit quite a long time ago, so the principle of this type of development. Policy 2, the local plan obviously supports improved health facilities, so it's in line with that. As I say, in terms of landscaping, the scheme provides for replacement planting in accordance with policy, and there are no other issues that have been highlighted which would prevent the development from going forward. So obviously a number of conditions recommended in the report, and subject to those, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dickman. Has anybody got any questions regarding the development? No? If I could ask Councillor Gloucester, I think he wants to, as a ward councillor, to speak on the issue.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just as a point of clarification, Graham, the first application was in 2009. It was 2012 was, because of the 3 years up, it was extended. So, anyway, when I was first elected in 2015, the first thing I ever did was write to the then clinical commissioning group and ask them what was happening about a new health centre for Shaw and Crompton. As I've been a lifelong resident of Shaw, I'm aware that this has been a thorny issue for between 15 to 20 years, and I'm aware that there's been 2 previous applications in 2009 and 2012 for this health centre that have fallen by the wayside. I actually received quite a positive response from the CCG, who requested a meeting, and since that time it's been a long road to get to where we are today. In no way can I take the credit for this application. A lot of hard work has gone in the background, led by my colleague Councillor Howard Sykes, as well as Shaw and Crompton councillors, both past and present. But I've never felt so confident that we are now in a position to deliver this much needed facility for our residents, as well as others beyond the communities of Shaw and Crompton. The old health centre was scheduled for demolition nearly 20 years ago, with relevant planning consent in place, but it still exists. And that health centre that currently exists struggles to support the needs of our communities. Residents are having to travel to Brighton and beyond. The new health centre should ensure that we have the right facilities in the right place and with the scope to cater for all our residents as well as others beyond. Just in relation to topography, this new facility promises vastly improved GP facilities, access to dental services as well as extended primary care facilities. The thing about Shaw Town Centre is that it has excellent transport links with good parking, access to local and out-of-borough bus services, and the gem that is the Metrolink. This facility will offer significantly more footfall into the town centre, which could only be good for local businesses as a knock-on. I'm delighted to see, along with my colleagues, that this application is recommended for approval, and I would ask that the committee support that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of Councillor Gloucester? Councillor Williamson?
I notice it says on here, as long as I haven't read it wrong, that it's going to have dental. Is it a dental practice? That's one thing, or is it one of those ones where it's like an emergency thing? And also pharmacy. We don't need many more pharmacies in Shaw, as you all know. So is that an error on somebody's part? Thank you.
I can't actually comment on that. I think Graham Dickman's going to have to comment. What I can say is when I actually read the report, I queried the issue in relation to pharmacies because as ward councillors we're well aware that we have pharmacies in Shaw and we don't particularly want this new build to affect the business of the local pharmacies that currently exist. So as a consequence of that, I've had inquiries made with the health body, and I've got an email off them today to confirm that they've no desire for a pharmacy, so I'm not too sure why that's in there.
Yeah, it will be in there because it was in the description of the application. From a planning point of view, it's an integral part of a facility. my local health centre as a pharmacy as part of that facility as well. And as members will be aware, competition between individual businesses is not a material planning consideration. So whether there are existing pharmacies in the local area isn't a planning reason to reject that element of it. But as I say, obviously the scheme before us includes that as part of the proposal, and therefore that's the scheme which is put forward for members to determine. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. It's just to reassure existing businesses, really, that the commissioning group have no intention of putting a pharmacy in, although it's in the report.
Councillor Alandani.
Well, it was just, although it is in the plan wouldn't force them to put a particular type of business into that space. So whether the approval wouldn't force that to have to be a pharmacy, presumably. So we'd get the health centre and we get the space.
I think the way to take this forward, obviously, we're looking for determinations, which you say an important facility. You won't want to have any unnecessary delay with this. There are options, as members might be aware, under the planning system to revise applications. And even, I would say, that the removal of the pharmacy, if that is what the applicant subsequently wanted to do, could even be dealt with as a non-material amendment to the scheme. So it's not an overriding issue, as I say, it's not a material consideration, but if what Councillor Gloucester's saying is correct, then clearly the scheme could be amended quite easily to accommodate that change.
Councillor Williamson.
So from what you've just said, Graham, that that could be done, so we could approve this tonight, but then we could, if you got confirmation like Councillor Gloucester has said, that they're not going to put a pharmacy in it, then that could be taken out as or you'd have to come back and say that is, what did you say, non-material?
Yeah, well, yeah, there are various alterations, if you like. There are formal ways of amending an application. A non-material amendment is quite a simple one. The pharmacy, although it's part of the wider description, it's not a part of the description of development. That's a medical centre. So what actually goes in it in terms of the details is not relevant to the overall proposal. So they could make another application fairly quickly, and it would be dealt with fairly quickly as well, which would basically say, you know, you could have an amendment to the internal layout, and if that shows a pharmacy, it would be allocated to some other purpose, associated obviously with the medical facility. So it's not a significant change, and it wouldn't take a long time, and we wouldn't anticipate bringing that back to committee. So, you know, that would be, you know, if that's what members feel is the case, then clearly the assumption would be that you'd have no objection to that change in any case. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any further questions? We're still on questions to Councillor Gloucester just now. If not, thank you very much, Councillor Gloucester. It's open for debate and comment. If people would like to make any comments. If not,
Can I just say, you know, I was part of this at the very beginning with Howard, and I'm just really pleased to see this, and thanks to the planning committee for what they've planning department for what they've done to help this go along smoothly.
yes, and funnily enough, I was part of the original application as the chair of the lift bid programme, and in 2009, and it's a shame that the planning permission that was given in 2009 didn't go ahead because of the government cutting back at the time. You know, the Tory Lib Dem coalition. Okay.
No, he's quite right.
So, if there's no further comment, I will move that we approve the application. Is that seconded? Thank you. All those in favour of approval, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. The final application today is the Victoria Trading Estate, and we've got a comparatively new planning officer, Emma, who is going to introduce the application to us.
Thank you. Sorry, the application relates to an existing industrial building sited to the northern boundary of Victoria Trading Estate, which is this building here. Vehicular access to this building is currently off Drury Lane to the north through Victoria Trading Estate. There are secondary accesses off Manchester Road and off Pennington Street as well, but this building itself actually fronts onto Drury Lane. At the moment. The proposal is to demolish this building, that's it there, that one, to demolish this building and build a block of 4 industrial units which would front into the Victoria Trading Estate. So the buildings would be sited on the same footprint as the existing building, but they would actually face into the trading estate itself, with parking at the front of the buildings and utilising the 3 existing entrances. The proposal is for B2 general industry and or B8 storage and distribution purposes, which is the current use of the building. Parking provision will be 81 spaces, and it's currently 81 spaces. It will be of a similar design to the existing units on Victoria Trading Estate. The only reason that it is actually at planning committee is because it's a building in excess of 1,000 square metres. It is a designated business employment area. And that is what it would look like. Yes, that's it.
Thank you very much, Emma. Has anybody got any questions on Councillor Williamson?
So does that mean that all the units will be facing the same way? Is that what is that the intention, sort of thing?
Yeah, so the existing industrial estate, all the buildings actually face into the estate themselves, and the proposed new building would face into the estate.
Is there any further questions at all? Okay. I'm just looking, I don't think we have any speakers on this. I'm going to say thank God for having that. So I could open it out for discussion. I think it's quite a simple application. I think it gives the benefit of better trading.
Can I move this for approval, Chair?
Yes, certainly. Is that seconded? Okay. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And the final item on the agenda is appeals update, and it's there for noting or comment. Has anybody got any comments on the list? If not, thank you very much indeed for your attendance and your contributions, and we'll see you next month.